When the gods of Olympus choose to walk upon the earth, and sometimes they still do, so be careful who you talk to and how you talk to them, because you never know when you might be talking to a god or a goddess. But when they walk upon the earth, they cannot come as they truly are, because any mortal who clapped eyes upon them would be incinerated by the blinding divine light. We would be reduced to ashes. So, when they walk amongst us, they take on a human body. Sometimes an animal body, but usually a human body. And those human bodies are as flesh and blood as anybody else's. So when Demeter, goddess of the fields, decided to walk upon the land in search of her missing daughter Kore, she walked in a human body, in the body of an ordinary woman, and she gave herself the name of an ordinary human woman. She called herself Dosso. And she walked for day after day after day, searching for her daughter to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south. Mile after mile after mile she wandered, looking, asking, searching, always searching, never resting, even by night. On and on and on she trudged, mile after mile after mile, even in the baking heat of the Greek sun. She was exhausted. Now, we know that Dosso, Demeter, was looking in the wrong place entirely, because Kore was not in the lands of the living. Kore was down there in the lands of the dead, abducted by Hades to be his bride. But Demeter, or Dosso, did not know this at the time. On and on she looked. At last, after many, many, many days of searching, she came to the lands of Eleusis. And there, her feet blistered and bleeding, her normally neat coiffured hair bedraggled and cascading down round her shoulders, where she'd torn at her hair and pulled out the tresses and scratched her face, and her eyes red, her clothes ragged and dusty and dirty and sweaty. She sat in the shade of a great big olive tree, looking for all the world like a beggar, like a tramp. And King Kelios rode past, king of Eleusis. And normally, of course, a king looking at some bedraggled beggar sitting in the shade of a tree wouldn't give a second thought. They'd ride on. Possibly, if they were a remarkably generous king, they might chuck a coin to help the beggar, but that would be about it. But maybe some part of the king, some part of Kelios, sensed that this was not any old beggar, that this bedraggled-looking creature was something special. Because he stopped, paused his horse, and spoke to her, and said, "Lady, my wife, Queen Metanira, has recently given birth to a baby boy. And our wet nurse, who normally looks after all of the royal children, she has fallen terribly ill with a fever. We are in need of a new nurse. You look as if you are in need of food, of rest, of a bath. Would you not like this job to come and work for me in the palace, looking after my son?" And even though Dosso had other fish to fry in terms of finding Kore, some part of Demeter, of Dosso, responded to this man's need, to the need of an infant. And she agreed to come and work in the palace. She was very tired and very bedraggled and very hungry and very thirsty, because she had not bothered to eat and drink in her long journeys. So she came to the palace. She was given a change of clothes, she was given a bath, the wounds and blisters on her feet and her face were tended, she was fed and watered, and at length, once rested, she took up her duties looking after the baby Demophon. And she did what would be expected of any servant in that situation. She changed his nappy, she played with him, she bounced him on her knee. Well, she was employed as a wet nurse, and the one thing she didn't do was to breastfeed him. Not that either of the parents paid an awful lot of attention to what the servants were up to. They just, well, did what rich people always do and just assumed the servants would get on with it. You see, she didn't need to breastfeed him, for she fed the infant Demophon not on the product of her, frankly, by that point, somewhat saggy breasts, but on ambrosia, the food of the gods. He was anointed with ambrosia during the day, and at night, when the parents had spent their 5 minutes of playing with their infant and their other children, they would pack them off to the servants to be looked after and washed and put to bed and so forth. But each night, old Dosso would hold the baby Demophon in the flames of the hearth, and the fire would burn around the baby, licking at his toes, at his ears, at his fingers. And he did not scream and howl in agony and burn up, because the goddess had enchanted those flames. The fire was burning away the baby's mortality, leaving behind a divine and immortal baby. For 3 nights and 3 days, Demophon was anointed with ambrosia by day and held in the sacred flames by night, until that 3rd night, when the queen Metanira, having finished her regal duties at a banquet hosting various dignitaries that had come to visit the land of Eleusis, happened to walk down the corridor where the nursery was, and hearing singing and crooning of a strange nature in a language she'd never heard before, the language of the gods, she peered through the open doorway, and there she saw the old servant woman holding her baby over the hearth, singing and rocking and crooning, and the flames licking up round the baby. And Metanira did what any mother would do if they saw their baby being held over a fire. She screamed and she howled and she called, "Murder! Murder!" She called for the guards, and the guards came thundering down the corridor. And the old woman, as the queen and the guards burst into the room, stood up, a look of wrath upon her face, and the guise of the old servant woman fell away, and she did not assume her fully divine form, because had she done so, neither the queen nor the guards would have survived a second. But she stood in half divine dignity before them, enough that they realised this was not just some old servant, but a wondrous being that was before them. And she thundered at the queen, in ire at having been accused of murder, the killing of her child, the one act that Demeter would never, ever do. She said, "Foolish mortal, foolish mortal! Had you but let me finish this spell, this act of magic, this night, then Demophon would have gone on to be a god. He would have stood with the immortals in Olympus. But you have disrupted the magic. You have broken the enchantment. He cannot now be immortal. He will suffer age, an illness, an injury, and one day death, like any other mortal. You silly, silly woman!" Well, the queen was beside herself. The guards were cowering and trembling upon the floor, faced with the wrath of an angry goddess. The king, when he came running, having heard all of the screaming and the wailing and the carrying on, he saw what was happening. He had heard enough of the conversation that he too fell to his knees on the floor, which is not something kings or queens do very often. And they begged and pleaded for forgiveness from the goddess, that they hadn't realised the true nature of what was going on, and Demeter, having cast off her guise as Dosso, she relented. She realised that, well, a mother seeing her baby held in the flames would leap to the most natural and most obvious, albeit false, conclusion that the child was being tortured and murdered. And so, although she could do no more for Demophon than she had already done, she consented to leave a great blessing with not only the royal family, but the entire population of Eleusis, and indeed, it has to be said, beyond Eleusis to every other part of Greece. For in her duties as nurse to the baby Demophon, she had also played with and tended Triptolemus, his older brother, and she had taken a shine to Triptolemus, and she taught over the next 3 days the secrets of farming and agriculture to Triptolemus. For the people of Eleusis, they lived by hunting and gathering. They had whatever animals they could catch for the pot, whatever fish they could haul from the rivers, whatever nuts and berries and fruit they could pluck from trees and bushes, but that was it. But with the secrets that Triptolemus acquired at the knee of the goddess, he was able to teach first the people of Eleusis how to sow grain, how to tend it as it grew, how to reap it, harvest it once it had grown, how to pound the grain down to make flour and bread and cake, especially cake, and all sorts of other wondrous things. And in time, as he grew older, having taught the people of Eleusis, he went on to teach people in other parts of Greece. And to help him in this task, Demeter gifted him with a chariot pulled by dragons that would race him around the whole of Greece at great speed, so he could go from city-state to city-state, teaching the people of Athens, teaching the people of Boeotia, teaching the people of the various other realms and kingdoms the secrets of agriculture, with one exception, it has to be said, because when he arrived in the lands of Sparta to teach them, the king of Sparta, for reasons best known to himself and his raging testosterone, tried to kill one of the dragons. And so the people of Sparta forever remained hunters and gatherers and never took up the occupation of farming. But that is another story and the fate of Sparta. And as for the baby Demophon, if you're wondering, he did grow up to become a great hero and achieve marvellous things, and is worshipped, or was, at any rate, worshipped in Greece for a very long time after his mortal death, which Demeter could not prevent from happening. But she had given him enough ambrosia, enough blessings in the fire, that he became a figure of legend in his own right.